topic of this section is UI basics. The basic goal here is to present the basic UI concepts that you'll need to use after you add data to your case. We'll talk about the UI workflow, the contents of the tree, and different ways of viewing file contents. Here's the basic UI flow in the primary Autopsy UI. There's a tree on the left-hand side. Selecting things from that tree allows you to view a set of items in the upper right-hand corner. By default here, we can see a table, but it's also a thumbnail view. And then selecting an item in the upper right allows you to view an individual file on the bottom, such as a picture down here in this example. We'll go through these in these various three panels, panel by panel. Let's start with the tree. The tree has 5 top-level nodes: data sources, views, results, tags, and reports. The data sources area shows you the data in your data sources organized by the file system structure. This is the same view that the user of that device would have seen, and it is the primary way you'd expect to view file system data. So you'll see volumes, you'll see root folders, you'll see Windows folder, program files, etc. The primary use for this part of the tree is to look for a specific location, such as if you want to look at the desktop folder, or if you already found one item, for example by keyword search or hash hit, and you want to view what else is in that file, that same folder or subfolders. Now by default, this area is collapsed, because you will often get faster results and more specific results with the background analysis modules that are going to find things like web downloads or web history or EXIF files or hash hits. So it's here, it's useful, but by default it's collapsed because most people tend to get their first results from some other method. The second part is the views area. This is showing you the same files that you would have found in the data sources area, but we've organized it based on different metadata. So there's views here based on file type, allocation status, or size. So for example, we can view files by type here, and this allows you to focus on just pictures, just documents, just executables, etc. You have 2 choices of how to find these files. One is by extension, and the other is by MIME type, or file signature. The benefit of extensions is that they're available immediately. As soon as the data source is added to the case, we can find the image extensions, which are things like .jpg, or .png, or .gif. The downside is that someone can change those extensions so that you don't find them, but they will still be a picture, or a movie, or an executable that can run or have content. So the MIME type, or file signature, is more accurate. But the downside is that requires you to analyze all the files to get those signature values out of there, to know that a JPEG starts with FFD8, and we can find it regardless of what its extension is. So you can do both. If you have just added a data source to a case, and you're analyzing the files for their file type, which we'll learn about later on today, you can just use extension as a starting point to find those pictures. If you've already pre-processed the data and already have all the file types figured out, you can find the files by MIME type. You can also view by size. So there's a size node here, you can open that up. There's a few options. The basic use case for this is to look for large files, because those may indicate that there's encrypted volumes on there, virtual disks, or other big containers that have other files inside of them that could be relevant. Below the views area is the results area, and this shows you the results from the background analysis ingest modules that we'll talk about later on today. These are the modules that are going to analyze the data sources that were added to the system. By default, many of the results show up under extracted content, things like USB devices, EXIF, installed programs, documents that were opened, etc. Some items that require a further level of organization, and they're pulled out. So keyword hits, hashtag hits, email messages, they have further structure below them, and they're out in a different layer than under extracted content. But pretty much all of the results that you'll get from any analysis modules are found here in the results section. The bottom 2 parts of the tree are the tags and reports area. The tags area is where you will find all of the tags that you created and that you tagged for the files, or perhaps your colleagues tagged. The bottom area of reports is all about what reports either you or a colleague generated, or perhaps one of the modules generated and added them back into the case as a report. We'll talk about both these things a bunch later on today. So by default, the tree is organized by these top 5 level categories I mentioned before: data sources, views, results, tags, reports. This can make it really easy to focus on certain kinds of data. So for example, if you had 2 data sources from the same person, you may not care actually which device they went to a website on. You just want to view all of their web history merged together to see what they're doing and what kind of things where they're going. But perhaps you actually want to separate that. Perhaps your case has 2 data sources from one person and 2 data sources from another person, and you care more about who was doing what versus what device it was. In that case, you may want to ungroup and unmerge these data sources together. So by default, on the left-hand side here, we can see we have 2 data sources that got merged together. We have 61 installed programs. We have 43 recent documents. On the right-hand side, we changed the grouping. We've changed the way that Autopsy displays things. And now the top-level item here is the hard drive. It's the E01 file. And below that, there's the data sources node, the views node, the results node, etc. But now we're seeing content for only that one data source. And down below here is the second data source. So you can see here, there's 38 installed programs on this data source, which means the other 23 are down below for the other data source. Or we have 18 recent documents here on this data source, which means the other 25 are part of the other data source. It's really up to you how you want to organize these things, and different uses and different investigations, different labs will benefit from choosing either everything merged together or everything separated. You can change the grouping in 2 different ways. One is display settings. So above the tree, there's a gear icon. You can push that and see a bunch of display settings, one of which is grouped by data source. Another method for doing this is if you open up a case that has more than 5 data sources in it, Autopsy will prompt you to see if you want to group them by data source or not. So once you've selected something from the tree, you'll then go over to the upper right-hand corner with the table view to view the items in that node in the tree. By default, it's a table view, such as this. You can move the columns around, you can sort them, you can do anything you expect to do in some kind of table view of these things. You may sometimes see them organized by pages. By default, we will make page sizes of 10,000 items. And the goal here is to improve performance by reducing the load on the computer. So if you do happen to click on a node that has 100,000 items in it, we'll only show you the first 10,000, and you can find a way to kind of reduce that data set down before we try and put 100,000 items in the display. One kind of little note on here that if you do want to search within the table, simply select any item on the table and start typing. And what will happen is you'll see this little magnifying glass pop up here on the bottom, and that will turn into a search feature within that table. So in this case, let's just say we had our cursor up here on duck, and we select that, we start typing in horse, it'll change the selection to go down here to find one that matches that. When you're in the table, many of the rows will have the first 3 columns that have icons or a number about them, and they have kind of cryptic headings to them, which are S, C, and O. So let's talk about what those mean. The first one with the S column is the score, and it will have a couple of different icons on there. One is this red icon, and this means that the item is notable when it's red. An item can be notable if it was a hash hit, if its hash value was in a notable hash set, or if you tagged the file and used a notable tag. Now we'll talk about both of how you do these things a little bit later as this course progresses, but the main idea here is that there's certain kinds of techniques that can be associated with identifying a file as being notable. And if that file is notable, it'll have a red icon next to it. The second kind of icon is the yellow icon, which means the item is suspicious. It's not really bad, it's not really good, but it's something you should be aware of. It'll get that icon or that symbol if a module has marked it as interesting, or if you tag it but use a normal tag instead of a notable tag. So these yellow items here are basically ones that, in case you see them again, they're a reminder that you previously, or a module previously thought that they were interesting and you may want to take a look at. The second column will have this little notepad on it, and it has a C header, and this is for comments. So there's a couple ways you can add comments to a file, one of which is just when you make a tag, you can add a comment along with that tag. The second thing is that the central repository, which we already talked about, which is that database that allows you to store data across cases, that if you make a comment about a file in the central repository, it'll have a little yellow notepad next to it to show you that there is a comment for that file. The third column is occurrences, and this will show you how often this item has been seen before in your past cases. So this again requires the central repository to be set up, and if you've been storing all of your hash values in the central repository of your past cases, this here will show you you've seen it 3 times before, you've seen it 5 times before, you've seen it 100 times before. And the basic motivation here of showing you this is you can see which files are very common and have a high number, or which files are unique to that person, or which files are kind of in the middle. But it's basically a way as you're looking through these items, these are all kind of reference points that help you get some context about how interesting this item may be to your investigation. Another feature in this view is machine translation. We discussed during the setup video that you can configure Microsoft or Google Translate with your system. If you have done so and you come across a set of folder names or file names that are not in English, they will get translated, and you will see the original name in one column and the translated name in the second column. In this case, we set our target language to be English, so they were translated to English. But if you had set your target language to something else, they would of course be translated to something else. Lastly, you can change from table view to thumbnail view to view, and that will go through those items, identify which ones are pictures or videos, and we'll show you a thumbnail for them. And these are also organized into pages to make that loading faster, because it can take a while to make thumbnails for some of these pictures. Once you select an item from the table or the thumbnail view, you can view it in the lower right-hand corner. This is what we call the content viewer, and there's a variety of ways to view an individual file or item that you selected. Let's go through some of them. The first one is the hex view. This is going to show you the raw contents of that file in a usual hex editor form, with offsets on the left, the data in hex form in the middle, and the ASCII representation on the right-hand side. It's organized into pages, and you can jump around to view the raw contents of that file. Now, if you really want powerful hex editing tools, there's a button here that says Launch at HXD. This is an open source hex editor tool, and if you push that button and you have HXD installed, it will launch HXD with the contents of that file already loaded in. The basic idea here is that what we want to do is provide you with a basic hex viewing capability, but if you really want to do powerful searching and parsing, there's better hex editor tools that provide that feature for you, and you should use them in the Autopsy hex editor view. The second tab over is called text, and text contains various subviewers that are all related to and focused on text. The first subviewer is called strings, and this is going to show you data that could be text in a given encoding. This viewer is basically the equivalent of running the strings command from a Unix system on a file. And the way that works is that it looks at every byte, or maybe every 2 bytes, and tries to interpret them to see that if this were text, would it make sense? In this case, making sense basically means it maps to a letter or some kind of punctuation. So in this case, this example down here, this is just looking at Latin Basic, which is ASCII, and there's 4 or more letters in a row that map to EXIF. There's a bunch of letters here that map to Eastman Kodak Company, and you'll see a variety of things that make sense up here. But once you get down here, this is probably just